That's the thing I live by, is people know you exist. If you want to network like a master and get people to, get clients and, and get a full-time job, or people need to know you exist. And if they don't know you exist, they can't offer anything to you. These art director tips landed me a job. And if you're in the concept art industry as a beginner or an intermediate, pay attention to this video, because these tips alone go across all disciplines in how to land a job as a concept artist effectively. I can't believe an art director gave me these tips to land me a job. Hi, my name is Caleb Arredondo. I am a concept artist who works in the industry and has worked on a variety of different AAA titles such as Valorant, Borderlands, Free Fire, and even Overwatch. Here are going to be some tips that I need you to understand as a person getting into concept art that most people don't teach you about. And it's just going to be laid out. And if you are a student right now and you got like a parent, a adult figure, or you got somebody in your life who just doesn't believe you, just understand that this video alone, you can show them it and it'll snap right into their brain. It just click for them, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to list out a couple of things that that are going to guide this video, right? First, we're going to talk about what is a concept artist. Second, we're going to talk about what do you do as a concept artist, right? Like what is the day-to-day? And then 3, talk about my art director's tips on stuff that he was looking for in my portfolio that landed me the job, and how you could apply that to your portfolio. And lastly, to cap it all off, actionable steps you could do right now to land you that job and that position, and set yourself up for success. So this is going to be more of a talking video where we're just going to go straight into it and just overall talk about what exactly is a concept artist, right? So a concept artist, if we were to think about the high echelon of the pipeline, a concept artist is a person who, essentially creates ideas. So we're creators of ideas. And with that in mind, we basically are the first to be in the pipeline. So, we're first in art pipeline. So essentially what that means is we have a pipeline as a concept artist where basically we have a list of, people that it goes down. So first it's like concept artist, right? It's a concept artist. Then we have 3D. Then we have, rigging. Then we have basically animation. And then from there we have texture, lighting, illustration, and then so on and so forth, right? So with that being said, we start at the forefront of production. If I were to be somebody who'd be like, oh, what is concept art? How do I explain it? It's essentially, we go from, we are idea makers, idea in the form of 2D and 3D, right? So where I work, a lot of people use 3D, and so we start the process by doing reference. So we get an idea of what are we doing? What's the thought process behind all of this, right? How are we overall thinking of the idea before we even start? The problem a lot of the times, and I've run into this, many of people I know within the industry run into this, is we skip this part, because what happens when you get good enough, or you've become so well attuned to everything that you've referenced, like your visual library, is that your brain, if we were to just, draw a brain real quick and then, kind of have the lumps and stuff, your brain is like a visual library that you sometimes fall into the trap of, oh no, why would I reference if, I have so much stored in here, right? So when you start off, we'll just say B for beginner, like this, you can't visualize anything because you haven't studied enough what it is you want to know. So if I said, draw like an apple, or draw this, you have an idea of what an apple looks like, but your hand-eye coordination is probably really messy. You're struggling to connect things and you might draw something that might look like an apple, but not anything too crazy, right? And then you get into like intermediate, where it's like, okay, you have an idea of what an apple looks like, but you're still kind of like messy in the way you approach things, and not as structured overall. And so you might do something that like kind of adheres to an apple. And then, once you get into like more advanced, and like, let's just put A and like P, like pro area, like you have like an idea of, pseudo an apple, and you've drawn it before, and, you can add your own flavor and taste to it, right? Um, and so that's something that, when you're starting off, a lot of the times, when you start working, you start being like, okay, I know how to draw an apple. I know how to stylize an apple. I've drawn it a million times. But sometimes we forget that, like, we've never drawn a jet engine. Like, we've never drawn a something new and unique, and like maybe it's from the real world, maybe it's an abstract shape. Like, we've never really processed that. And so what we'll do is we'll think of a cool idea that would put us in this beginner category of like, I understand this? But then we're like, I don't know. So then we'll like reference something that's very similar that we've drawn multiple times, and sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't, but like it's not innovative enough. And a lot of times technical skill kind of comes in. So as our jobs as idea makers, we have to be okay with starting here. But a pro can do, like, look at this, like, doesn't know how to draw whatever they're trying to draw or look for or whatever, but they'll execute it at the technical level like this, right? So their brain thinks this, and then immediately once they look at the reference, they go here, right? So always start with reference, right? Always start. And if you're at intermediate or if you're at beginner, that's fine, but just understand that you need to put in the reps in your technical skill, your hand-eye coordination, all that stuff. So eventually, when you do reference something, you're executing at this level, but you're executing at this level, but you now understand why you can execute at the level, because you can see it in your hand-eye coordination is there, right? So with that being said, we then reference, then we ideate. So ideate in a sense is just a fancy word for ideation, idea, stuff like that, right? So when you ideate, it's essentially you take an idea. If we were to just point it here, we take an idea, and let's say we have a block kind of guy. We'll say like an iron golem from like Minecraft or something. We all recognize an iron golem. If I remember what an iron golem looks like, but it's something like that. Let's say we take an iron golem, and Mojang was like, hey, let's change the iron golem to be something different. First we have to think about a lot of things, ideating silhouette, ideating proportions, ideating stuff like that. But overall, it's really just changing how we perceive the same theme in different ways, right? With different ideas. So maybe we have this guy right here. Instead of short arms, he has longer arms, which I think the Iron Golem already has, but let's just say for the sake of this, longer arms for reach. And maybe instead of just one block, maybe we can redefine the forms, right? So now, Minecraft is very blocky, but I think in recent updates, they've kind of changed how things are organized. So maybe he has like, different shapes, right? Because we're just simply ideating. Maybe, instead of, let's think of another idea, right? Because this also comes with ideas, right? You can think of, maybe he has one big arm, and then he has one tiny arm for whatever reason. We can always think on the fly of, the idea. Maybe that's how iron golems are born, or at least a different variation of them, right? Maybe the way you build an iron golem is not just like this, which is a T, and then you put like a head on top. Like, what if you were to do it like this, right? Think about how you actually build an iron golem. What's the difference between one arm versus two? Right? Maybe, because if you were to set a block down and then you were to put like two across, would it automatically make the golem? What if you were to put another one to signal to the player, hey, this is how a iron golem is made, like at least a one-armed one. And what's the difference is like maybe they have like a farther reach, right, when they're fighting enemies. So like they're really good against zombies. For skeletons, they're like really hard to deal with, right? They might be slower. So this might be like a faster, more, walking unit. This might be a slower unit, right? So overall, that's ideation. That's where you're creating ideas and building upon them, right? So after you've ideated, you're going to go from ideation to cleanup and call out. What are cleanup and callouts? Cleanup and callouts are essentially when you're designing a character and they have things that are very unclear, even if they are clear. If they're very unclear to the audience, or not the audience, you're like, the next in the department, like your boss, your 3D modelers, they're essentially there as a way to be like, hey, this design is now done. I'm ready to ship it off to the next part. And callouts are where you're just calling out how things work. And cleanup is just rendering and stuff. But just an example, I'll just draw a quick character right here. And let's say like right here, for whatever reason, this character has something that isn't obvious. Let's say we create like a character sheet. We, as concept artists, create like blueprints for other departments. We're like the architects of, game design. Let's say over here, character had something that was like big shoulder pad, arm, Giga Chad, something that stuck out a lot. Now, from this angle, you could probably see what's going on. I'm only making this super quick as an example to get the video across. You might see it very clear at this angle and you have an idea what's going on. But for whoever's getting this next, they might look at it and they go, wow, that looks really cool. I just don't know what I'm looking at right now. So what you would do is essentially create, not only clean up this character to make them look as cool as possible, but you would probably do something like a back view, in which I'll just make really quickly. But you can draw the very big Giga Chad arm, and then it would show for other departments like what they're looking at. They'd be like, oh, interesting. Okay, so that's how it works. This would be the call out and cleanup part, right? If you look at my portfolio, I have a lot of, these where it's like, I'm essentially just calling out specific points, or I'm doing an orthographic, or I'm doing, stuff like that, right? So that would be the tail end of the part, right? This part, the ideation part could last as long as you want. But the minute you're like, okay, I think I figured out the idea, I know what I want, then you go into the cleanup and callouts and kind of build from there. And then next we go to illustration. Now, well, no, illustration would be, oh, okay. So next we would do either movement studies or we'll just say animation. So I'll get into what I mean by this later, but you do not literally have to animate, although it would be impressive. Essentially, animation is just movement studies. So you would draw them doing like a really cool punch or VFX or animation, and then from there, you, the person, go to like say blur, motion blur, and then we like change the angle. Like you from there can like have fun and do a bunch of movement studies that adhere to the character's personality. So animation, movement studies, VFX, stuff like that, where you are now giving context to the character. We'll put like a thing right here that says context. So what does this character actually do? Who are they? What is their role in this world that you're building for the character? And lastly, I like to call and so what does that mean? As it is, literally just designing an illustration for the character. Doesn't have to be a Riot level illustration. Understand that bit. It just has to be really polished. Like change their pose, change something, give them the selling point, the marketing point, the thing that makes people go, oh my goodness. Because that alone will bring people in. It's kind of the hook of it all. Like, it's funny, the hook, you start at the end, it only starts at the end, but everything else is the beginning. It's because you need to sell. It's almost like if you were at a car lot and you saw the car, not the manufacturing of the car, right? So think of the money shot like that. You are the salesman. You need to pitch ideas. You need to, like, overall, people need to understand the vision, right? And that's all that this is. All that is just understand the vision. All of that being said, we get into the next part, which is the awesome bit that, advice I got from my art director prior to getting art directed, right? Prior to having the job. So I remember at one point I was applying to a bunch of different places, internships and jobs and freelance and all this other stuff, and I would get freelance here and there. I actually was doing pretty okay, but I just needed a leg up. I need something. So I took one of my now art director's classes, and I remember distinctly going into that class being like, okay, he works at Gearbox. There's a position open. I need to impress him in this class, and I got to see what happens, right? I mean, what do I do here, right? So I do pretty well in the class. I mean, I'm like asking questions, I'm engaging, I'm just talking to him more. I said, hey, how do I do this? Yada yada yada. And then after the class, what ended up happening was I essentially built a I like asked him, I was like, hey, what do I do? Right? What do I do? Because I was really lost in just what next steps do I take? So I was told, so right after that I asked the question, I was like, what do I do? I was told you need to have about 6 things in your project, right? You need to have exactly what I was telling you before, everything listed there, but I'll explain in detail how it's put to be presented. So if we were looking at ArtStation, we have our money shot page, so character. We're gonna have orthos, which is our call out page, so character doing thing, and then back of character doing thing, and then a bunch of stuff on the side, as like weapons or whatever. Then we're gonna have our movement studies, so character doing more things. I don't know, he's jumping, he's happy, and then maybe he's doing like a backflip. I don't know, he's doing like a backflip. I'm just showing off skills at this point. Maybe he's like, and it's like backwards or something, or VFX or animation, whatever you want to do in this page. So we'll say money, ortho, movement, or animation, movement, and then here, onwards from here is just pages of ideas. So this is 6 pages of ideas, or not 6 pages of ideas, 6 pages of what is, so 3 pages of ideas, 1 movement study, 1 ortho, and 1 money. So this is literally just exploring what dude is doing, big dude with tiny legs, long lanky dude, with huge arms, dude with crown and no arms, maybe he's like a mage or something, and then like dude kind of just like walks around and he has like big spikes everywhere, right? He's like Giga Chad of all Giga Chads, and then maybe like Wombus dude, and then maybe we have like big mech or something, right? And so with that, he's like money shot, ortho, movement, and 3 pages of design. Do that 3 times and we'll check you out, right? Or at least that, he was just like, yeah, we'll that's what I'm looking for, right? Environments, I think it was a little bit different. This is specifically for characters, so I don't know, or I don't remember specifically what that was, but we now have our blueprint of like, what does that mean, right? If you're curious on examples of how that looks like and how I adapted that concept in my portfolio and what got me into a job, if you are curious about how I applied all of these concepts and just this, money shot, ortho, movement, these 3 pages, and what does that look like specifically and in depth. Download my PDF down below and sign up for my waitlist, because there you'll get a concrete vision of what I'm going for. No hassle, no stress, no nothing. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just giving you the PDF of the step by step, what it looks like in full action, right? And going over every single detail, every single thought that I personally created for myself when doing exactly what was told and what my art director gave me. With that being said, he was like, all right, you have to do 3 of these. So for me, I was like, okay, well, 3 of these sounds pretty reasonable. I mean, how long could it take? One of them took me 6 months. About, I think, yeah, which was one of them that I really liked. One of them took me 6 months. I think one of them took me about, no, it was like 3, and then it was like 1, and then I already had pieces in my portfolio that people already liked, so I didn't do the third. If you're not really getting opportunities, or you're struggling or whatever, just do the 3. Another thing that I was doing was I was active on social media. So this was like one. Another, that was the advice my art director gave me, right? Time goes on, I make those pieces, and I'm applying for the Riot internship. I get an interview. I unfortunately fumbled the ball. But afterwards, I thought to myself, even going back to this, where I was just like, I mean, what do I have to lose? I mean, I got 2 of the 3 pieces down. I even have more in my portfolio that's like more of like one shot, like money shot kind of characters, just spitballing an idea or something. And I go into the interview, or I go in to apply, and 3 days later I get an invite to the interview. And from there, honestly, they were just like, hey, like, let's just find out, like, we like your portfolio, let's gauge who you are as a person. And they did. And from there on, I mean, they showed me the project. Now you guys see it's Borderlands 4. And it was like the most eye-opening moment from that point. And so to cap it all off on this, whole video, I want to leave you guys for some last minute advice that I would give to you guys, to how to apply this to your portfolio, how to apply my lessons from my art director, my lessons from myself, and how I grew into your portfolio, and what to be doing right now in 2025. So let's get into that. First, start your social media journey. And I only say this as a social cue, or as a way to document progress. Now you go, what does that have to do with anything? What if they're going to see my ugly work? What if it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you are showing progress, you are showing growth. And one thing that I've learned is that I had a client reach out to me. Literally, they said, a year ago, we were watching you and your profile, and we loved your work. We didn't have anything back then, but we do now, and we wanted to bring you onto the team. So this, people might not want you now, but they go, maybe a year from now, people pay attention. And then not only that, yeah, it's cringe, it's funny. I mean, you're watching this video right now. People pay attention, but also people know you exist. That's the thing I live by, is people know you exist. If you want to network like a master and get people to, get clients, and, and get a full-time job or whatever, people need to know you exist. And if they don't know you exist, they can't offer anything to you. That's why, I mean, you see like all these social media, mega stars, they just know you exist, right? Or we know they exist. Overall, they exist because they're just marketing themselves. Because at the end of the day, that's all it's all about. Like your job is your client and your boss, right? Like they hired you because they knew you exist, and they now know your talents exist, right? So they want to utilize you to build their project, and you want to be a part of that mission, right? So start your social media. I mean, social journey too, but document, process, all that stuff. 2, build a portfolio. Now I'm going to be careful about this, but I say build a portfolio. If you are a beginner, do not worry about this just yet. I would honestly put 2 for beginners, like adjacent. I'll put intermediate, and advanced, and I'll put like beginner. I'll put 2 as beginner, right? Foundations, just making that clear, right? I know this is about building portfolio, so I won't go into foundations here, but just so you know, if you're a beginner, don't worry about the portfolio part yet. Down below is going to be my waitlist for my courses where I go into all that foundational stuff. Go there, but that's not this video. Build a portfolio. At most, 10. 10. I'll just give it a straight number. 10 is all you need. If you have more than 10, if you have, and what I mean by pieces, I mean projects. Let's just say projects. If you have more than 10, it's not, I'm not saying this as somebody who's going to like gatekeep you out of doing 10 or whatever the case may be, but having more than 10 a lot of the times shows people that you don't know which one of your pieces is higher quality than the others. And so it brings less, weight to your piece, essentially, right? So if I look at somebody's page and they have like 50, now if it's a pro and he has like 50 pieces that are like executed to the highest abilities, and we all know that because when we look at his pieces, executed to the highest ability, and it's all client projects, doesn't matter. But if you are in that intermediate kind of, getting their footing advanced area, keep it to 10 because you want to focus on quality at that point. You want to focus on knowing which ones are good, knowing which ones that you want to have there, right? So we have 10 projects. With those 10 projects, swap out one every like 6 months. I'll say 6 months. If you're working faster, you create something better, you could swap it out sooner. I say once every 6 months because, again, you're showing growth, right? You want to be able to have people see your work, and when they see the pieces, and this, I'm not talking about Instagram, I'm not talking about Twitter, I'm not talking about YouTube or whatever the case may be. I'm talking about when you're making your art station, you're making your website. Those are the best of the best pieces that you have made and projects that you have made and uploaded, and you just culminate them all together, right? So you might want to swap one out once every 6 months so you don't have this like stagnation of delay of like, when, like, again, like I said, a client saw me a year ago and was like, wow, I saw your work and we didn't have anything, but we have something now. If that same client came back to me a year later and saw that I didn't post since that year, they're not going to offer me anything. They're like, did this guy even grow? Did this guy even improve? I mean, unless the next post is like some insane stuff, but like, they don't know. So you want to make sure that your best pieces get swapped out with even better pieces and just keep repeating that cycle. Third, this is another one I would say for more, getting into the advanced territory, but build a resume. Build a resume, right? Just list off most things that you have done. Make sure it's very adherent to what is related to the job. So don't put Subway, don't put some factory job that you worked on, like, unless it has to do with team leadership. But again, at the end of the day, they're going to look at your work and the experience, especially if you're going for like an associate or associate slash junior or a mid-level. They're going to like look at your work and be like, we'll see. But if your work already is outstanding, they're just gonna be like, oh, okay. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of experience, but his work is so outstanding. Let's just bring him in, right? We have the budget for it. So just keep it relevant. My suggestion for you on that, or like, what if I never get experience? Freelance. So when you post on social media, you will definitely get somebody who wants to freelance you, especially if you have your email available. Game jams, indie. So if you know somebody or if you see projects online just doing some indie projects, apply, right? Ask, give free value, talk to them, do stuff that would build this resume. Because if you're just drawing and you think you're like, oh, I'm going to get into Riot or Blizzard or Gearbox or Sony Santa Monica or all these big name companies, like that's the first thing you're going to put on your resume, like good luck, because you need other things to put on your resume before you hit those big whales, right? For me, On my resume, I had freelance work and I had my Riot internship, right? That's a big whale. I mean, I got the internship, that's pretty nice, but like overall, if you don't get those opportunities, you need to build something somewhere else. So that's just my suggestion. So start your social media journey, build your portfolio, build your resume. Like that's overall what you need to do. The build the resume part was, you know, part of what I was talking about before in the last part. And then foundations. Um, everybody, and I'm not even talking just like, oh, it's beginners. I'm just honestly gonna remove the beginner part. Most people need to focus on foundations. I need to focus on foundations. Like, you know, I'm talking like big, even bigger names. They focus on foundations, and I put that there because that's what matters, right? At the end of the day, because all of this, all of this, null it out, cross it out. If this does not align, cross it out. Does not matter. You can have the coolest idea on the planet. You can have space galactic fishermen that, you know, fish stars to power their giant ship, and you can, you know, draw some crazy stuff. But if it does not have great foundations, if your perspective's off, your forms are off, your whatever's off, it does not matter. It really doesn't. With that being said, I hope you guys find value in this video. And if you did, make sure to comment below, let me know, subscribe, and overall, you guys have a great day. Peace, peace.